Hello, good morning everybody. Glad you all can make it. All your line crews are here for another episode, Linemen Safety National Webinar with Miss Jenn Miller, OneSpan Powerline Services. She'll be speaking today about helicopters and line work. So this is going to be a totally new Linemen Safety National Webinar. We've never had this before, and she's bringing it to the table. It's going to be a great meeting. I've seen some of the things that she's going to be speaking about, and a lot of the things she's going to talk about will challenge your mind, and it'll get you thinking about what you do out there in line work, not just working with helicopters, but everything in between as well. So real quick, ECOS, Electric Culture of Safety, 18 months now, solid 18 months. And we have officially, we just crested 10,000 registered members throughout the country for anywhere from IOUs, electrical contractors, cooperatives, municipalities. We have some line schools. Everybody is coming on board. And what we're doing in ECOS is we're coming together to talk about incidences. We're talking about preventing incidences. We're discussing these things openly. So you guys could take these home, you guys can share them, and you guys can keep your crews coming home to their families. That's what this is about. We're forming a line team, all right? So what we got here next month, we got Mr. Tony Boyd with ISPC. He's going to be coming in, I think, around the 23rd of October, 24th of October, and then Miss Pam Tompkins with Set Solutions. She'll be speaking that next day on the 25th. So we've got the best speakers coming, the best safety professionals, similar to Miss Jenn, that are sharing their heart, sharing their passion, and their want to keep you guys coming home, that want to. All right? So Miss Jenn, take it away.
Thank you.
It's great. Appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here. I have approximately 35 years of experience in line work and construction. With that, I just want you all to know I started when I was 5. So today we're going to talk about life in the wire and what that means. So sometimes you look at line work and you think, well, is this a helicopter company or is this line work? Well, we do both. And what we are is a line work company that utilizes helicopters instead of bucket trucks. So that's just our method of getting there. And so there's a lot that goes into it when you add in helicopters and the safety, but it's right along the same line that we've always done with line work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is our company. We do have different groups within us. We have like our helicopter company, and we're here for OneSpan, but we also do some other oversight and things as part of DaVinci Sky Group. So we're going to talk about human physiology as it applies to human performance. And we all know human performance is extremely important in what we do. So looking at the eyes, our eyes see so much, as we know, and it's so important in what we do. Many times when you're looking at after an incident, whether it's a car incident or a helicopter incident or a line work incident, we didn't see it coming. It just appeared out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't see it. So we're going to talk about some of those and why we may or may not see things.
I don't think it's uncommon to have nightmares about flying and getting tangled up in wires.
A wire strike accident is not the kind of accident that tends to happen to the young and inexperienced pilots.
Pilots need to understand not all wires are marked, and at typical flight speeds, they will be almost invisible.
There's a good chance that you'll come across some situation that will catch you off guard, and you will let your guard down momentarily, and that's what it'll get you.
Totally invisible, never saw any poles or anything whatsoever. Just all of a sudden I'm looking at the shoreline of the river and then the water, and then just multiple strands of wires just that quick.
I did have a near miss about a year ago. There's 4 towers that are very close to the airport here. I see them every day when I take off. Very familiar with where they are. I had been watching these towers, but I forgot about them for a moment. And when I looked up again, I was only 5 seconds from being entangled in the wires. It made it very difficult to sleep that night.
Okay, so one thing she said I'd like to talk about is a near miss. And so many times we do have near misses and we feel it's a bad thing and we don't report those. And honestly, that's where we can learn the most, especially when we can learn it even from someone else. So that's one of these purposes of sharing incidents, sharing things before they become a true accident or incident with injury or cause, but that we can actually learn from those items. So I strongly suggest that we, really continue to push reporting of near misses so that we can learn before an incident. And that's just what she was talking about, something that she shared. But if you look at this, this is what we do know. Experience is not the indicator, training is. So we have to continue to train. And one of the other phrases that we hear a lot in our line of work is work as trained versus work as performed. And when you look at work as trained, that's how we should do things. But many times we learn shortcuts and it's work as performed. So those two need to match. And if they don't, we need to relook at our training program or relook at what we're doing in the field. So here's another one on your eyes and the wire environment.
I'd like to talk about the subject of how we see and avoid a hazard. In this case, we're talking about wires specifically. First of all, there has to be an image on the retina. This means that the pilot has to aim his eyes in the right direction. In other words, he has to look. He has to be looking. Then the pilot has to perceive that there is a wire there. This is based on memory and experience. He then has to project his flight path and make assumptions about whether he might be on a collision course with that wire. If he decides that it's even a remote possibility, then he has to make a decision about what kind of evasive action to take. Should he climb? Should he descend? Should he turn? Finally, he has to move the controls, and then it takes a certain amount of time for the aircraft, a helicopter, or it could be an airplane, to respond. This whole process can take up to 5 or 6 seconds. Depending on the lighting situation and the background, the lines may be completely invisible, they may be very obvious, it can change from moment to moment. As we look at these lines, the same set of lines, you can see areas where some of them are very obvious and easy to see, and others are invisible. And that's always the case. And so that's why it is so important to first take a look at altitude, a recon, before going down there.
So very interesting that you can't see them in many cases. And it's really important that we do the recon the morning of, or if things are going to change. So it's part of what you do for your tailboard, and that we do the morning of, never the day before. So as he talked about, this is what your eyes see and what your brain does in 5 seconds. And that's even when you think about other things that we do related to line work or driving. So this is training day, and this I find very interesting, and it's going to have not just for pilots, but for linemen and in everything we do.
We had to figure out how to make the whole thing safer to the crew.
Keep your aircraft moving until you can see the skyline. Let me know when you can see the skyline.
I'm not sure about this. I can see the conductor, but I can't see the rest of it now.
Just keep it moving until you see the skyline. Just keep moving forward.
still can't see it. You know what? I'm not really comfortable with this here.
That's all right. Just keep moving forward till you see the skyline. Don't worry about it.
Well, you know what? I'm going to stop here. I can't see that skyline.
All right, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Don't let somebody talk you into doing something you think is just absolutely crazy.
So for me, this is key. And when I first saw this video a year ago or so, it really brought home things. How many times does someone push us to go a little bit further? Keep going. It's okay. But it's not. And when you feel uncomfortable, and this is exactly what that instructor was trying to get to him, when you feel uncomfortable, what do we need to do? We need to stop. We need to reevaluate. We need to get ourselves out of that situation because we have an intuition. We need to listen to it. Do not let someone talk you into doing something that you're not comfortable doing. This is our eye pattern. And when we're focusing on something, this is our eye movement and exactly where it goes. So you can see we're taking in a whole picture, but there's still things we miss. So we really need to look at that a little bit careful. And this is how our eye moves. As we're scanning and bringing that stuff into for our brains to process and then for us to react or do. So with aviation, the physiology, it focuses on how flying impacts the physical and mental health of the pilots, the flight crew, and the passengers. Okay, some of the different things that of environmental changes that can impact us are marked changes in barometric pressure, the variation in temperature, and movement at high speed in 3 dimensions. There's other issues when we're flying in the wire environments. We can have low back pain. Those helicopter pilots are in there a long time. They lean out all the time. They're always looking out the window or the door, really. You have vibration. You are looking at a line and you're focused on that. You can lose track of things around you when you're doing inspections. The rigging that goes on for the linemen, and general shoulder and forearm pain. So those are some of the other issues that are encountered. So this test you may do if you're watching this. It's kind of good, but this goes back to, and I'm going to grab my notes on this one because there's 2 I'm going to grab notes on. But this one was the Raiders football team. They were looking at their quarterback hand-eye coordination, and that controls how fast you can release that ball. They had 7 quarterbacks up, and they could only pick 3. So they wanted to go and figure out, was there a test? And they talked with the local medical college to find out what tests could be done. And this is what they did. Because you snap, you scan, and you release. And this needs to be done very quickly and very accurately. And again, the same thing for pilots and linemen alike. There's a lot of things we do. We scan, we snap, we scan, and we release. And we want to make sure that we have good response time. So this is a little test that goes on. Okay, so some people think, oh, that's easy. I mess it up almost every time. I'll hit something soon, but it really is response time and what you're focused on. And when you're only focused on that, that's great, but think about everything else that's going on. If you get distracted for a second, you know, your phone buzzes, your watch buzzes, somebody walks by, and where your reaction time is. So it takes a lot of really keeping in there, and it's a lot to get our response time to where we need it. So I think it's a good focus of what can you do, can you keep up with it, and something to practice, even to keep your mind sharp. Your eyes are like 2 jewels in the sky. So remember, we use our eyes for everything. All right, we'll change a little bit into crew resource management. This is very, very key in what we do. So threat and error management. Threat management deals with the future. Error management deals with the past. So on this one, I also have to pull up some notes. This is the helicopter that Kobe Bryant was in on that unfortunate day back in January 26, 2020, where he unfortunately passed away. This crash killed 9 people, including Kobe and his daughter, the pilot, and the other passengers, all headed to a basketball game for his daughter. Tragic, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but the whole key to this is to break the chain, the accident chain. According to the NTSB, the pilot was experienced, but ignored his training, violated flight rules by flying into conditions where he couldn't see, and he failed to take measures such as slowing down and landing or switching to autopilot that would have averted the tragedy. The pilot felt pressure to deliver his star client. The pilot may have also had what is called continuation bias, which is an unconscious tendency among pilots to stick with the original plan despite changing conditions. Well, does this just apply to pilots? Do we do that as foremen, as workers? Even when we're driving, even in our personal life, do we stick to the plan instead of stopping and regrouping, re-job briefing, and going over it and having a discussion? And I think that a lot of times, if we can get back to that continuation bias, I had not heard those words used, but it's the same philosophy. We have a plan, we're going to do it. We have a client that needs this done and they need it done today. The line has to get back in service. How many times do we push that envelope? So what I would say is really think about that. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So what is crew resource management? It's a management system that makes optimum use of all available resources, including your equipment, procedures, and people, to promote safety and enhance the efficiency of flight operation. We'll talk a little bit about those, but we want to use all the tools we have, all available resources, both human and technology. So when you look at this, these are the core elements of situational awareness, coordination, communication, decision-making, task management, and mission planning. So under situational awareness, we talk about this a lot. We really have to be aware of our surroundings as the situation actually exists. To do that, we achieve, we maintain, and we recover. So how do we achieve this? We stop and we think before proceeding. We look around our environment for safety hazards, and we'll talk a little bit more about a trick that I like to use. We analyze the risks present and whether we're prepared for them, and then we manage the situation, and if necessary, we halt the work until we can mitigate those risks. To maintain situational awareness, well, we limit electronic devices. We know they're a huge distraction. We completely sometimes lose our surrounding. Have you ever driven down the interstate and realized maybe you went by your exit, but you sure don't remember the last 3 because you were on the phone in a heated discussion or something that you were passionate about? It happens to us. We need to avoid multitasking. I thought for years I could multitask, and We can't. All we do is flip from one to the other and back and forth. So remember that we cannot multitask. So lose the distractions. You need to be completely focused on what you're doing. Watch for fatigue and deviation from standard procedures. Utilize clear and thorough communication, and we'll talk all about these in a little bit. To recover, have a plan, brief the plan, and follow the plan. If you can't follow it, you need to stop, redo the plan, rebrief the plan, and go again. Coordination. We need to agree and be clear on our objectives. Be friendly, open, and considerate. Use initiative. Give direction and take responsibilities. Make sure that if there's criticism to give, you do that privately, but also it's not really criticism, it's coaching. That's what I call it. And praise professionally. Admit mistakes and identify errors. We make quite a few mistakes all the time, every hour. They can be little minimal things, a misword, a misstep, but they're all little mistakes and they can add up to something bigger. So communicate. Know who to communicate with, when it's appropriate. Ensure that recipient is ready and able to receive that communication. Listen actively. I know for years I was really guilty of listening, but only to respond. We're not hearing what people say if we do that. Allow open space. Really take in what someone's saying. And I have to continue to practice that every day. These are things that I work on daily. And be open and receptive to other people's ideas and views. I think this is a big one for our entire country currently. So there's barriers to communication. With physical, you can have noise, technical difficulties, environmental. With physiological, we can have speech or hearing disorders or illnesses that put us to where we have a little bit of difficulty for communication. And cultural, language, expressions, and even generational. From an organizational perspective, the barriers are policy conflicts, pressure, and status. So, emotional, we can have anger, pride, or anxiousness. And again, back in the personality and attitude, a work ethic, and the openness that we have. So in aeronautical decision making, we have the 3 Ps: perceive, process, and then perform. So under decision making, when we're looking at risk, so with part of us, we all do JHAs, but we also do a risk analysis when we're utilizing helicopters. And we can start off with our risk management being in the red, because you add line work in helicopters, people think, oh, there's a lot of danger. There is. However, it's just like anything in line work in driving right now. What you do with that is you need to mitigate the risk and you bring yourself back down to a green. That's what we do, and this is part of it. So on our risk management, we look at all the risk and we're able to take those risks and mitigate them with appropriate protective measures. So first of all, we identify and verify the problem. We see accurate and adequate information. We don't make assumptions. Don't jump to conclusions. Really follow the process through. Look at all practical options, which I think is key. And then consider risk, but don't take unnecessary risk. There's risk in everything we do from the moment we get out of bed. But it's the unnecessary risk that we don't need. So here are some hazardous attitudes. First one, don't tell me how to do it. Have we heard that? I know I heard it from my kids. I got this. Don't tell me how to do it. I've heard as a safety professional, you're not a lineman. No, but I'm around here to help you too. We're a team. Or hurry up, get this done. No, correct is always better than faster. And here's the one thing that I'll take a little bit of a difference on that is, I have done it this way my entire career and nothing has ever happened to me like this. I can't tell you how many times as a safety professional investigating incidents and accidents for the many years I have that I have not heard this. So do me a favor, don't bet your life on it or your health. Macho. Watch this. And what's the use? We don't need to do that. Don't get into these hazardous attitudes. So on the task management, mission planning, we have before, during, and after. So before, we want to research the task. We want to make sure we know what we're doing. We want to gather and prepare resources, have our timeline or our schedule, and does it make sense? Can we actually follow that? Maybe we've had weather delays in there. Can we still stay on schedule? Or do we need to go back to the client and readjust? Check the weather. Make sure you know what's coming. Look at all your potential risks and develop alternatives or options should something not work. During, we're going to look, are the conditions as planned? Are the resources and tools that we have suitable, or do we need to get something else? Is the schedule still realistic? Has the weather changed? Is everyone involved performing their designated role? Do we need extra help? Is there something that someone else can do? And are we monitoring our progress? After, you want to go back, it's kind of like, how did things go? Did we plan accurately, or do we need to adjust our planning in the future? Was the schedule accurate? And if not, why? Was it more than weather delays? Was it equipment delays? Were there other unforeseen issues? So again, kind of going back with that, the crew resource management, we are looking at situational awareness, coordination, communication, decision making, mission planning, and task management. So, mission planning, and this goes back to the whole incident that we were talking about on Kobe Bryant. Did they research the task? Yeah, the pilot had. Did he gather and prepare the resources? Sure did. Did he develop a timeline and schedule? Yes. But this was changed by the customer. They wanted to get there earlier, so they moved it up or moved it back, whichever it was. Check the weather. Yes, he did, but he didn't consider the change. Did he identify potential risk? No. He didn't complete his risk analysis card, which is key in everything we do in line work. And did he have an alternate plan? No. He was confident he was going to get there. During, are the conditions as planned? No. The ceiling and the visibility began to reduce. Was the schedule doable, realistic? Yeah, it was, until the weather changed. Did the weather change? Yeah. Were resources and the tools suitable? Yeah, but they weren't used. Autopilot was never used. The different options he had. Was everyone performing their designated role? No. They failed to follow the correct recovery procedure and company policy. Was progress effectively monitored? We don't know. We can make some assumptions, but we don't know. Afterwards, was planning accurate? No. Was the schedule accurate? No, because the customer requested something different. What unforeseen problems occurred? The weather deteriorated. And did the plan options work? No, none were considered. So this is again into the continuation bias, the self-induced pressure, and what led to that fate that day. So I think it's a good example of bringing it into how we have the best of plan. We're really out to try to please people and how things can go wrong. So again, don't get caught up in this continuation bias. The best plans sometimes just don't work out, and don't feel that you have to continue to go with it. Find a new way, stop, and readjust. All right, so now we're going to get on to some of the practices that we use, some of the best practices and some safety around aerial line construction. So when you're utilizing helicopters, a lot of people say, well, we're aerial linemen, that's overhead. For me, it's still a ground contractor. You use a bucket truck. With aerial, as I'm talking about it today, we're utilizing helicopters to get our folks to where they need to be. So we do, these are some of the regulations that we use. We're talking a little bit about our HASP and our site-specific safety plan, but here are some sources if you have questions about the rules dealing with helicopter work. So our health and safety plan and site specific, they make sure that we're ready for the work ahead, that we've actually looked at the job scope, where we have clear expectations around our client. We have our LZ locations, which are our landing zones. So that's where we set up and take off, and we'll show you some more on that. But those are our LZs, so that we have the shortest flight time out to the structures. So the time we can minimize in the air with our linemen, we can be close, but close enough that we can get them there. We minimize that time, thus we minimize hazards. Our emergency response information, and we'll talk more about our safe work procedures or our work methods. Obviously, we start off with a job briefing. You're using your JHA and what you've looked at. We have our tailboard. This begins for us right after the pilot arrives with the helicopter. So they all meet at the LZ. The helicopter comes from the local county airport or wherever they have staged, and he and the mechanic meet together. They start the process out, but the full tailboard with the whole line crew ends up once he's on site. It's led by the foreman and the pilot, with obviously everybody participating. The difference with OSHA talks about the PIC, or the person in charge, in 269, right? We're all aware of that. But with the FAA, a PIC is the pilot in command. So for my purposes, to keep that separate, the foreman, which would be the person in charge, becomes the employee in charge. It just makes it easier. So the PIC and the EIC must work together to run that. The pilot, and we'll talk about some of the responsibilities as we go along, but the pilot ultimately has the ultimate responsibility for that load and anybody attached to that load. So everybody signs it. The big thing I would like to say about this is if there is any scope change, anything that's different, you might have been doing the same thing, and we've seen this in not one of our incidents, but we also do third-party oversight where we've seen something. You change one thing, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Things can, we get comfortable, we get complacent. So just make sure, even if it's as simple as changing the length of the long line, you take time to do the JHA again, or at least the tailboard, and document it on your job briefing. So these obviously are the things that we discuss. Fatigue is a big one for us. It should be a big one everywhere we go, but it is a big thing that the FAA talks about, but in line work in general with what we're doing. But these are the items that we go over. So obviously, we're looking at the job briefing. What's the task? What are our hazards? What kind of control measures are we going to put in place, and who's responsible? So this is typical of all line work, or should be. All right, yes, that is me. I did get to long line, and I loved it. So I will say, one thing is me as a safety professional, and for those of you on here that know me, I do things probably a little bit different than many. Very active in the field, and yeah, it is fun. I'm not gonna lie. But I've gotten to do a lot of things in my career so that I understand what, from a safety professional's perspective, what I'm asking of you as a lineman. I want to understand. When you tell me, well, you don't know what gloves and sleeves feel like. Yeah, I do. Well, you don't know how to put on that nut or that grip. Yeah, I do. And yeah, I do mess it up too. But I want to understand that, because I want to make sure nothing I do impacts you adversely, and that it's meant to be there, and that I can truly understand what it's like to be, in FR and gloves and sleeves in 115-degree heat index. It's not fun, I get it, but these things are there for our protection, and we can't shortcut those things. So that's why you'll see a little bit about what I do. I will tell you, safe work procedures in aerial line construction, they are followed to the T. If we can't, we have to stop and readjust the procedure. And my hope is, and I've seen improvement in my many years doing this, but my hope is that we follow procedures each and every time. Don't say, oh, we don't need that step, or even worse, don't even have a procedure for doing it. If we can get to that point, I think it really helps us. So we follow them, they're in place. If they can't do them as written, we have a very quick process that we can go back, and we send it goes into safety, into our leadership team, the chief pilot, our ops director, and we make those changes that If that's what's recommended by the crew and the pilot, the entire crew, we will go through and look at it and make those changes. If we can't do that, then we readjust on what work method we're going to use. Maybe we can't do that HEC and we need to switch to skid. So this is an example of this is just for patrolling. And patrolling, people say, oh, it's not a big deal, we can just put people out there. No, this is really going to challenge your physiology, which is the stuff we talked about earlier. So we have our warnings in red, our cautions in yellow. This is the procedure. If we're starting up a new job, we read these procedures in our tailboard so that we understand exactly what we're going to do. So in the LZ, our proper PPE is a Petzl, is normally what we use, or a fly helmet. A normal hard hat is not normally used. You do wear a chin strap. I have a lot of new linemen that come out that don't have aerial experience. They hate those chin straps because they don't look cool. I agree, I don't really like it either, but you know what? I've gotten used to it. That's part of the things when there's change, we have to get used to it. Because I'm definitely not going to be that guy or gal that loses my hard hat into the rotor. And that is going to happen. So make sure it's on tight with that chin strap detached. We have work boots. Our FR, again, if you're inside a substation, the client requires, or we're up in the wire environment, you have to have your FR on. Otherwise, if it's not required, it doesn't have to be on the ground. The high visibility safety vest or shirt, again, once we're up on the structures, we don't necessarily need that, but in the LZ with anything moving, just like any job site, we need to have that. Here's a big one we don't usually use in line work is hearing protection. This is crucial because your ears, again, we don't want to lose our sight, but can you imagine never hearing the birds chirp again or hearing your child talk to you or your spouse? So wear the hearing protection. We have work gloves when we need them for what we're doing, and then a radio. And we'll talk more about communication. A radio is key. Let's talk about complacency. This is something near and dear to my heart in everything I do. Overconfidence, overestimation of our abilities, and underestimate the risk. It's a big one for me. We've got this. Think about driving. Man, we do everything now driving down the road. What about when you were 16 and got your driver's license? Did you do all that? No. None of us did. Would you want your kid to? No. So, driving is one of the most hazardous, if not the most hazardous thing we do every single day. So, take time. Don't overestimate your ability. All right, this is a skydiving. I was a skydiver for years. I still have my license. I don't practice anymore or enjoy it, but I loved it. I was a licensed skydiver. This isn't a complacency example. It's a little bit gory, but I think it proves a point. That changing one thing can totally lead to an incident. One thing. So in this case, when you go into skydive, you walk in, you check it at a counter like this. You give them your name, your license, your FAA license. You get all that stuff. They want to make your day just the best day. Get you checked in, give you your time, where you can go pack and get changed, do all those things, and get into the mood. And this was a small skydiving zone, drop zone, and they decided they were going to have a boogie, which brings in a lot more people. So with that, they hired a different aircraft. And every day, the manifest lady would go out and ask the pilot, walk out, what do you want for lunch? Straight out, get his lunch order, come back, order it. And so when he came down for fuel, to minimize the time that they weren't in the sky making money, that his lunch would be there waiting for him. And on this particular day, again, she went out to do it. And he tried to stop her. No. But she was so set because it's the same thing she did every single day. Problem was, the airplane that they had brought in had the props on both sides. And he couldn't stop her. And she walked right into it. So I know that's kind of gory with that, but that is something that seems pretty small. We change. How many times do we change a helicopter, or more likely a bucket? Different things, a crane, a vehicle. Think about a rental car. I'm used to driving a truck. I have this small rental car while I'm here, and that mirror takes up like the whole dash. I can't even hardly see out that windshield. But I did for years, but now I've changed. We take the time to understand what we're working around when we make changes. Second example on complacency is the TSA. We all know, we've all been through there. They take our liquids, they take our toothpaste because it's over 3.5 ounces, all the other things. But how do guns and knives get through? And I'll tell you, my dear mother who's passed, she got a knife through. She didn't mean to. She got it through 3 times. And again, she didn't mean to. It was at the bottom of a bag. And when she found it, she had been on 3 different flights. This was a few years ago, but not that long ago. Why don't they see them? Well, when they've done the studies, they're used to seeing water bottles. They see them every other customer, sometimes every customer. What do they ask you in line? You got a water bottle in there? No. Even when we don't, I mean, we'll say no. Our water container might be filled up. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. TSA are trained to see, and they're used to seeing water bottles. They are not used to seeing knives and guns. So even though it goes across our screen, they don't see it. Even something right in front of us. What do we hear? I never saw that. But it was right there because we weren't used to seeing that. We didn't expect it. So we may catch the things we expect, but sometimes we really need to take that little bit of extra time to see those things that we don't expect. And it might just make a huge difference. So how do we combat complacency? Fundamental training. A proactive safety management system, making sure we look at the hazard, also analyze those risks, and then put in the mitigation. We hold our employees accountable. And the 2-minute rule, which we'll talk about. This is my favorite. So a 2-minute rule, our LZs are roughly 100 by 100. We have 5 crew members. Put 1 in the middle, 1 on each of the 4 corners. Everybody scan for 2 minutes, the whole area. Just keep looking around. Sometimes we're looking up and we forget to look down, or vice versa. And then we get together and we talk with our coworkers. What did we see? And let everyone have a turn and mitigate those. What's different than what was here yesterday or this morning if you're after lunch? This is a great, quick way of really looking at hazards if it's taken serious. 3-way communication. This is big for us on radios. So we're communicating by radios, head or hand signals. So we're on radios. Think about it. We've all played that game where we tell somebody something and then by the time it gets back to you, that's not at all what you said. Well, here we need to have that 3-way communication. I'm going to tell you, you're going to repeat it back, and I'm going to confirm or deny, and then start the process again if it wasn't what I said. So this is really key in what we do. I see a lot of this being done, but I think we can even get better. And watch people when you communicate, because they might repeat the words back, but are they really getting it? Or are we over their head? And they're just too scared because they're brand new and they don't want to look dumb. They're not dumb. We need to encourage them to speak up. And we need to be understanding, even if it's something that we think is very simple. Stop work authority, we've talked about this everywhere. It's your obligation, but it's your responsibility. So many times I ask linemen, man, you guys, this is a great career. I mean, I've been in this my whole life. I love it. It's been a great career for me. Would you want your child doing it? Most of them say no. Why? Because Timmy over here, he's not a very good foreman. I really don't want him teaching my kid. Well, maybe we ought to fix that, because this is a really, really good place for them to be. So with stop work authority, with speaking up, with following the stop, notify, correct, and resume, we can change that. We can make it a safe place for us to work. Yeah, there is hazard. We know that. We're working with electricity, and in my case, electricity and things that fly. So with these things, we know there's inherent risk, but we can mitigate those. We can put those things in place, those processes in place, so that we don't have to have another accident. And we can learn from the near misses and from each other. And my hope is that as companies, we share this information so that we don't have to learn it again. And even some companies I've seen in my past where we have it happen here and it happens on another job site on the same company. But even, we just need to share information. And when we get to that point, things are really going to change for the better. They're already changing, and they're already good. And I got to put a plug in for ECOS like this. This is exactly what we need. Openly sharing information that safety professionals have been doing for years. So obviously, if something's not right, we stop. Questioning attitude. Am I standing in the right spot if something goes wrong? If everything comes coming down, all the conductor comes down, am I standing where I should be? Am I in the bite? We have to think about that even when we place the helicopter. Are we in the bite? Look around. Have that questioning attitude. So communications. So one of the requirements is that communication has to be maintained between the air crew and your ground personnel at all times. Okay. The signal system is very similar, must be understood by the air crew and the ground crew, including signal persons prior to hoisting of any loads. When using head signals, I've had a few of aerial linemen, so you have an X or a plus, whatever you want to look at it, on top of your pencil. That's so that the pilot who's up in the air can see the movements more. And a lot of times as they're hooking up, and we'll see some of this, they'll get a, which means yes or up. He can't see that. It's deliberate head movements. Make it so that there's no question, because the last thing you want to do is start going up when you weren't ready. So again, we go over this, hand signals, head signals, as well as making sure our radio works. Here's our phonetic alphabet. I've always made up my own, so now I've had to learn the proper one. You know, I would make up different things when people ask for different codes when you call in. But these are exactly what we use with aerial linemen and our pilots and what they're used to. So this is something that, as I do training for new linemen coming in into our system, that we go over. Here's our hand signals, which are very similar. Okay, and I'm leaving that up there just if somebody wants to grab a photo, but they're very similar. And again, we train on those during our new hire orientation when you join OneSpan. So safety in and around the helicopter. This sign, you will see that prior to entering into our landing zone or our LZ. We want to make sure that people are aware, because with what we're doing, we get a lot of curiosity from neighbors, people driving down the street. They'll stop. It's like fireworks or something. As far as they're like very engaged with what we are doing. So with this, we want to make sure no one's entering, and we're all watching out on the ground, but sometimes we're very busy. So we have a couple of these up, as do most operators, and we want to make sure that that people stop, and that we're able to give them their job briefing prior to entering. Under the landing zone, anyone operating or working within 50 feet of our helicopter with the blades turning are under the direction of the pilot. It's whatever he says. We make contact with that pilot with our eyes, like we do on a motorcycle. Just like when you're driving down the road, you're making eye contact to make sure that they're looking at you too. And with a helicopter pilot, you want to make sure that he's signaling with you and that he sees you. Never, ever approach the rear of that helicopter unless he directly authorizes you and you've had that conversation. If you're in the helicopter, obviously we're wearing seatbelts, and our rule is no one will be in the helicopter with less than 30 minutes reserve fuel. In the landing zone as well, all loose items must be secured within that 100 foot within the LZ. Make sure your chin strap is fastened. I know, it's not attractive, but it works. Use your hearing protection, it's very loud. Wear your safety glasses, it's very dusty, like very dusty. And if you're carrying any items, even paper, that stuff's gonna blow. Anything that blows going up into the rotor wash can get up into the rotor. You don't wanna be that guy. Anything else, and we'll talk about it, we carry horizontal and waist or below. Don't smoke near the helicopter, and again, be cognizant. As they come down, it doesn't feel so windy, and as they keep coming down, it picks up. And when you're dealing with a sky crane, let me tell you, I have to hold on. So approaching the aircraft, maintain your situational awareness that we've talked about, which can be difficult because of the things we've talked about, from noise to dust to complacency, unfamiliarity, you're not sure, you don't know where to go. I remember the first time I went to enter a running helicopter, and your hard hat, you're like, well, your pencil, what do I do with it? You better have the chin strap on, number one, but number two, it may be the policy that you don't have that on at all as you're ducking in and you're holding it, okay? Because when things, and I've had accidents in line work where things are starting to roll over or tip, the first thing you do is you grab. It's reaction. Same thing with your hard hat. It starts to go up, even if your chin strap's on, but especially if it's not, you're gonna put your hand up. You can't put your hand up. Everything needs to be down here. It's not a place to be. And so it talks a little bit more, watch for sloping terrain. You need to make sure so that your blades, and you wanna make sure you're not at the tips of the blades out there just standing for no reason, because that's the spot that goes up and down, and you're gonna have some movement there. So these are just a couple other examples of where the danger area is so that you understand where not to be. And a lot of times we go directly with this skid. Be up here. There's no reason to be back there. So only qualified personnel may hook up or land loads, and that can be people or materials. Avoid standing directly beneath a suspended load. We learn that in all the things we do, but this is sometimes different because you're helping somebody land, but it's not different. So don't get caught up that, oh, this is different. It's not. It's still people, but you don't want to make sure that they're going to land on you. Loads should be pushed rather than pulled if ground positioning is needed, and always, always have an escape route in the opposite direction of where they're coming in for landing so that you can get out. Grasp that hook as soon as it's in reach and control it. So we all know that's any kind of hook that's coming in, whether it's a crane or this. And again, we've talked a little bit about the head signals. One thing too on static discharge, when things fly through the air, they pick up static. So if you're bringing in either even the hook, or it could be a baker board or something, it's gonna bite from that static from going through the air. So just make sure that you allow them to touch it to the ground, which will dissipate that static. So here's a couple examples of helicopter incidents that I thought I'd go over. It just shows where we get complacent and some of the stuff that's gone on.
Look at this surveillance video of a Pasadena police helicopter accident. It happened in November 2012 on the Pasadena Police Department's heliport. One helicopter was flying in and another was getting ready to take off. That's when the rotor blades of one chopper collided with those of another. Police say 6 people were injured, including 5 officers on the helicopters and a civilian on the heliport pad. They were all treated at hospitals for minor injuries and later released.
Amazing that man standing next to the helicopter didn't die.
So when you can see, it looks like you have a lot of room. So you really have to think about the length of the rotors, where you are, and the proximity you are to other items. We'll look at this one.
St. Louis Midwest Helicopters. They're all taking a nice flight with Charlie, our pilot.
Okay.
Boy, I got a little one who wants to go. He wants to go. He wants to ride on. He's right on that. Ending gear.
Okay, with that one, what happened was they had brought that out of the hangar that morning. They didn't clear the hangar door. Again, not paying attention to their surroundings. So you really have to look up, around, down, and everywhere else. Those blades spinning, they're getting close. And when that came up, they hit that. This is another incident. And this is a Chinook. What they found was the iPad had fallen down. The iPad had gotten in between, up against the pedal and the lever, adjustment lever, and were not able to, there was no way they could get it out. They couldn't see it, nothing they could do, and that was the cause of the crash. It was stuck down there. So again, watch where things are, make sure things are tied down and can't fall into spots. In this case, that's what happened, and that's why we want to make sure things are tied down and secured, cannot fly anywhere in the helicopter or out of. So that's a picture of our one of our helicopters, an MD-500. We have a routine maintenance program. This is our director of maintenance, Joel, and this is all the stuff we have to do for inspections as we go along with flight hours in addition to all of our equipment. So then we'll talk about our equipment. Harnesses, okay? We use them in line work, we use them all the time. Number one, in aerial line work, I know if they wear their leg straps because I have to, and I can see it. In buckets, a lot of people don't wear them. So I'm speaking to you, put them on. Put them on. In aerial line work, there's no option. I can see, and if you don't, well, it's not going to be a good day. But make sure you're inspecting. We've seen some harnesses that have not been done so well. And we want to look at all the inspection of our equipment. This is your lifeline. I used to do it when I was obviously up in a bucket, but also even skydiving. We want to make sure. So this was an example of the protective cover where the carabiner is installed correctly on the left, but on the right, this actually went through only the protective covering. And this was an incident, and they were managed to stay on the long line, but they actually fell a little ways down. That kind of broke through. So this is the kind of stuff that you want to look for on your harness. You want to make sure that there's no fraying, that all the stitching's there. If it looks old, even though it's your favorite, it's time for a new one. Let it go. We want to make sure that these are going to do you well should you need them. And if they ever go through a fall, they got to go. So we use our lanyards, our pelican hooks. We make sure that the lanyards are not frayed, that our pelican hooks open and close properly, because this is key to us. And one of the things we do, obviously, and I think I'll talk about it, but we have the A-frame where we attach our harness to. We also attach our pelican hook up to the thimble up top so that we can make sure that we have a secondary attachment there. Tool lanyards. If you drop it on an aerial line, it's gone. It's usually gone in a bucket, but you might find it. You might hurt somebody, but tool lanyards are a big thing. So make sure everything's tied down. You have carabiners, you have your other lanyards strapped on to your harness so that you're not going to lose your stuff. Drawstring bags. So this is something a little bit different. A lot of times our line bags don't have drawstrings. In aerial work, you need it. That stuff, you might hit something, might be gone, and you need it. Your positioning belt, look closely at that every single morning, and things change, and you think it's fine. But did you verify it? Did you really inspect it today? Please take the time. This is what our Petzls look like. This is Lyle's with the ear muffs. Again, sunshades. Mine has a sunshade on it because it's way different than a hard hat. You have nothing, so it's a lot, and that light comes right over your safety glasses. We lay out and assemble our materials, lay out our tooling and rigging. As you can see, our slings are on there. Most of our ladders you'll see, there's rope going down each side. That's the place to tie off your equipment and tools. And we put everything on here, and we'll see a video of when they take off. But we need to make sure everything's prepped. Our slings, hoists, bags, grounds, they're in the position they need to be, so they're not completely flapping around, so that we would not, have a second point of contact. And then making sure everything, and make sure you check that radio right before you go up again. Things happen. So HEC, my chief pilot, he's awesome, and I said, well, HEC is like long lining when I first got there, and he said, it's all HEC. Anytime the pilot has to stick his head out the door, that's HEC work. So it's there's something external. But Class A, as defined by FAA, is our platform or skid work. The B is the HEC work, and then C is pulls, wire pull, rope or wire pulls, conductor pulls. And then there's also a D, but we won't talk about that. So back into Class B, these are our clearances. This is all part of our safe work procedures, our HASP, as we go through. And it goes through that we have no more than 2 line workers. If we're transporting equipment, we're also, if it's like materials, we don't have a human underneath that. It talks about what we can and can't do and what we're doing for speed. So that's on everything. Again, we've talked about the job briefing, but I'm going over each of the items separately. And then, are we ready for work? This is the tailboard's complete. We got our clear scope. We have our pre-flight checklist done. The weather's within our defined limits. Power check has been performed on that helicopter. We have fuel, and we're fit for duty and ready for work. Here's your peer check. So for me, I learned it in skydiving. I've learned it with everything I do, peer check. And honestly, make sure that a new person knows how to put a harness on. It sounds really trivial and really like, are you kidding me? I'm not. And I was actually asked that by OSHA if I had documentation for that, years ago. So just keep that in mind. Some people, they're not going to tell you, and they might have it on all wrong. And again, check each other, especially when you start adding layers of clothing. We're coming into fall and winter, so make sure we're checking. So the PPE that we need is our fly harness with a line belt, positioning device, strap, and you can read the rest here, but this is what we do. And this is the way, obviously he's getting ready to take that ladder up. The groundman's helping him get that off, and we'll see that in a video. Our long line work, I think we've talked out of this. One thing I will say about the long line, inspect it daily, okay? And you inspect it, don't just let the pilot, you should know this. Whether that's anything you're doing, a man basket even. Obviously I'm not using man baskets, but in line work in general, inspect it just because someone else put it together. And don't walk on the long line and leave it in mud. And you'll see how we land one here. This is what we do. It goes in a bucket so that it's like anything. We want our ropes to be clean, and we want this long line to be clean. Here's the connection. We'll look and test the cargo hook, inspect the long line and the A-frames that attach. Prior to transfer, the pilot will complete a detailed recon flight. We've talked about that, to look for those hazards, to look for anything else that could be around. The pilot and line worker, they confirm that the radio's working, and they all understand before departing that LZ, and this is one of our LZs. And this is exactly how you hook up. He attaches the A-frames to the designated points on the harness, and then the fall arrest lanyard, also pelican hook, can go up to the thimble of the long line. Peer check, communicate with the pilot. He'll slowly lift him to make sure that the harness feels good, and then off you go. The line worker is still part of that crew at this time. If he sees birds or other hazards, he is to communicate and notify that pilot. So he's his eyes and ears as well. So here is a takeoff. So you can see we were adjusting harnesses. You could see his head movement. It could have been a little bit better, and the pilot could have waited a little bit longer for me to get my harness underneath a little bit better for a seated position, because you do want to be comfortable. But overall, excellent. So this is when they transfer to the structure. They'll slowly lower the line worker, and you can see this is just a still photo, but you can see them on the ladders. They'll lower that structure, ladder, baker board, etc. Once he's in position, he'll signal to the pilot to hold. He will secure himself. He first removes his lanyard from the thimble, transfers it over, and then he's able to remove and transfer his positioning belt. That is the way you do a 100% tie-off period. And then any cargo is landed after he's in position, and then you install your personal ground. Back from the structure, it's just the exact opposite. Okay? Ladder transfers, so this is what they look like. He's in the yard to assist with picking up and landing ladders. They attach to the long line with a positive connection like a carabiner. When you're descending the ladder, you have to use a SRL attached to the arm. Positioning devices may be hooked to the ladder rungs for positioning. Grounds hoist and other conductive objects need to be hooked in such a fashion that you're not going to breach MAD. And all the rigging and the people combined cannot exceed 800 pounds. And make sure no loose items. So this is... So there is one that was really good. You can see the groundman's helping, or in that case it was our GF, but he was helping them get up, make sure that ladder so it comes up straight and gets out of the area. One thing too, and I don't think I talk about it in communication, there's an emergency communication method, and that's called the bump technique. And the helicopter pilot will grab on the line, you know, they'll be able to move the helicopter so that there's movement on the line when you feel that bump, or the lineman can also pull on something to give a bump. And that just means look down for the pilot or look up for the lineman so that we can get on the same page. So it's another method if all else fails and you need to get their attention quickly. And here's another takeoff. Okay, so that, and you saw they had a little bit of difficulty. They came back down because there was something that was caught, go back up. And again, using the head signals. And again, the familiarity of the pilots. Like, I mean, the pilots, they're so key to this. And I mean, their accuracy is just phenomenal. I absolutely love working with our pilots. And And so this just talks about the hookup with the ladder, exactly what you saw, exactly how they hook up, and then how they go in and land it. Okay, they have to make sure the hooks are even, and then they hook the ladder chains and slings back onto the hooks. And then once they give an all clear, the pilot will begin to lift at that point. Okay. And then this is a HEC return. And as you can see, he was using hand signals. Your feet are up till you get down, you touch, boom, you stand up, and with that, then they help you disconnect. That way you want to get off that line as soon as possible. These are just some of the work we do with Baker boards out there, working platforms. Really, they're not. Baker boards are called that, but okay. Our emergency procedures. So on HEC Class B loads, which is, you know, human external cargo, what we're going over, they are jettisonable. And what does that mean? That they can be released if you need an emergency procedure. So, but there are ways. That's not something that we practice, but we do let people know that that is a possibility. That is something that we go over with them. If there is something, there's an emergency and they need to put them to the ground, that pilot's going to get them as low to the ground as they can before jettisoning, and as slow as possible. And just like in skydiving, you use the parachute landing fall method. And we do go over that, and I'll show a picture, and you want to get off that long line. So this is just stuff that we go over through our new hire, and this is basically how we teach somebody, if you're going to have to land, how you do it. The skid work, Class A, again, we go through the same thing that we've talked about. Go through our tailboard, everything's within our defined limits, the crew's ready. This is what a platform looks like, not attached and doesn't have the weights on this one that it would on the one end. And this is the stuff that we need. They will have a flight helmet instead of a Petzl or anything. They will have a flight helmet with radio communication. There's William out on our platform. And you know, really as they all explained to me, the skid transfer, I have not done a skid transfer. It's steady and easy, like getting into a canoe in the lake, because you're stepping off and you want to make sure that you're not, rocking it. I did get an example of a lineman in Puerto Rico. He started his transfer prior to the pilot signal that you have to wait for. That way you know he's ready. He accidentally pulled the heli towards him, causing a rotor strike. And the lineman quickly returned to the structure, and the heli did land safely, but seriously damaged. So it was amazing as things were flying through, parts were flying through the air. So again, slow and steady, transfer over. And that's why I said training on this stuff, that's what mitigates your hazards. Training and really understanding. Same for platform work. And here's your, again, this is in all of our safe work procedures. On Class A loads, you can't move around freely. You're not suspended below the heli's landing apparatus. Materials and people are transported in an external cargo on the rack or the skid there, and etc. Hookup. The line worker attaches the fall arrest lanyard to the aft center hard point or jack point handle. He attaches his positioning strap to either handle in a manner that places the body in his appropriate position for line work. Verifies he has everything, because, you know, just like in a bucket, we use hand lines. With this, we got to re-land. And honestly, I haven't seen too many hand lines many places, so we use that bucket up and down. It's much better to use a hand line. I'll just get that in. And make sure your radio's working, and stay vigilant, because you're another set of eyes. And then they approach, always maintaining the prescribed rotor clearance. You know, he does hover in there, verifies it's the proper location. That's happened, right? Whether we're in a bucket or it could be a helicopter or anything. So make sure you're there. And then you're going to bond on And don't fixate on the wire, keep a visual scan. And then coming back, it's the same point of thing. Gradually shifting, you want to make sure you're at 100% back there. Okay, so emergency procedures on here is to hold on tightly. You move your head and upper body into the rear passenger compartment, and do not unbelt yourself or attempt to climb in unless the pilot's authorized you. So this is what I don't have a lot on Class C, but this is a side pull that we did, and I thought it was worth showing. It's kind of cool. I don't think there's sound on this one, but this is just an example of a side pull. There's a lot of precision in this. It's extremely, it's awesome that they can grab that and go put that in and then go take it and put it into the travelers or dollies. Okay. A lot of skill out of these pilots. And it's really important that they understand our work, and we do have, we have one pilot who was a lineman. So all those things really take into account. They're a team and they work really well together. And this was just done on a recent storm up here, up just a little bit north of here this year. And as you can see how quick it can be done, and done very safely and efficiently, and especially in areas that it's hard to be at. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank ECOS for what they're doing. We at OneSpan Powerline Services, we are all about this, and my mission is to give back to the linemen and to this trade and to make sure everybody can do their job safely and go home. It's been a huge passion for me and a huge part of my life, and I appreciate that. My email's at the bottom if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them. But again, go out, continue improving this line of work and the methods that we do it. And I just thank you for what your service, what you do each and every day. And you know, at the end of the day, all that matters is you go home safely. Thank you.